Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet. This review is brought to you in part by Rogers Hobby Center in Saginaw, Michigan, where the fun begins.
This review covers the Mod Rod Boss Roadster. It's a 1929 Model A double kit in 1/25th scale from AMT, number 1002. Now, the lightweight Model A was a favorite for hot rod builders, and its V8 power during Prohibition prompted the beginnings of NASCAR. Now, the Model A has been released a couple of times since '62 as Kit T129, and the Mod Rod version came out in the '60s. Once again, in 2016, the Mod Rod double version kit resurfaced with the ability to build two complete cars from one kit. Now, this is a skill level 2 kit for the intermediate builder, and it's got over 150 pieces, mostly molded in yellow, clear amber, clear red, chrome, with black vinyl tires and water slide decals. When you're done with the kit, the dimensions for the stock Model A with the top down are about 6 3/8 inches long, 3 inches wide, and 2 3/4 inches high. And the Mod Rod version with the top down is only about 5 1/2 inches long, 2 1/2 inches wide, and 2 1/2 inches high. Oh, that's Newt tapping on the glass there. It sounds like he's got a question about this kit.
Wow, those are some real antiques too.
Hey, well, what do you mean by that?
Oh, never mind. Hey, I didn't know they put two kits in one box. Is that a special deal or something?
Well, they would sometimes offer 2-for-1 deals with older molds and, just to try and get some sales from paid-off tooling. And it was a good deal, and you'll still see those every once in a while. Even today, they'll bundle a couple of kits as a package. Here are the contents of the kit. As you can see, they're pretty nicely molded still. They still look pretty good. The flash is not too bad for such an old design. A couple of nice looking chrome trees there, and all the parts you need to build two complete models. Now, we'll be using liquid cement for most of the build. Sometimes, however, some super glue for, small fragile parts, or even occasionally some white glue or crystal clear for the window pieces. Please remember, however, to heed the manufacturer safety and use guidelines for any of the products that you see or hear in the review. Here are the decals for the kit. There's some pretty nice looking sponsor decals there, and some longer stripes that you might need to use some setting solution for, but the register is pretty good and the colors are great, so these are nice decals. I noticed that there was some residue left over from the mold release on some of the parts, so the first thing I did was wash all the parts in some mild soap and warm water, and then let them thoroughly dry before continuing. Now get these pieces out of the kit and assemble the block halves and the oil pan and the cylinder heads, and put the distributor into place. It's attached to the head there, and the engine assembly gets painted a Model Master dark green. The fan belt is painted semi-gloss black for the pulleys, and some Testors flat black for the belt. Then it is attached to the engine assembly. And now we'll use these pieces to assemble start the other engine there, and that's engine block halves 47 and 48. And I'll go ahead and assemble the cylinder heads. Those are number 101, and the intake manifold attached to the engine block. Now the engine assembly gets painted Model Masters gloss black, and the front cover and both exhaust headers, the generator, oil pan, and both valve covers can be attached to the engine. Now both of the 4-barrel carbs, numbers 49 and 50, get painted with a blush of Testors brass, and then attached to the intake manifold. Now the dual air cleaner can be added to both of the 4-barrel carbs. The fan belts, Testors semi-gloss black for the pulleys, and Testors flat black for the belt. Then you can attach that to the engine assembly. I decided to add a little realism to this kit by using a pre-wired distributor. And the mold-on, distributor that was on the engine, you just cut that off, and the new distributor and the holes can be drilled into the engine block for the wires. Of course, where the distributor shaft goes and the spark plug holes. I spent a couple of weeks doing internet search just to see where the distributor would go. Now here are some of those bonus parts. These were used to build the Avenger option street rod engine, and there are extra pieces in this kit. And now we'll work on a set of the wheels. The inner wheel halves, there's 4 each, part numbers 29, and outers, those are part numbers 30. They're painted Model Masters gloss black, and the inner wheel half is installed into a stock Model A tire, and the outer wheel half can be applied to the other side of the stock Model A tire and glued to the inner wheel half. Now, the wheel hub can be attached to the outer wheel half, and then you repeat this for the other 3 stock Model A tire assemblies. Here are the pieces that you'd use for the street rod front tire assembly, and the rear wheel inners number 4 get painted semi-gloss black, and the rear wheel inner then is installed onto the front of one of the Firestone tires, and a custom wheel can be installed on the other side of the front Firestone tires and glued to the rear wheel inner. Now you repeat this process for the other one. We'll use these nice looking Firestone pad printed tires for the street rod rear tire assembly, and the rear wheel inners numbers 42 get painted semi-gloss black, and the rear wheel inner then is installed into the rear of the Firestone narrow slicks, and a custom wheel can be installed on the other side of the narrow slick and glued to the rear wheel inners. You repeat this for the second tire. Now we can take a look at one of the frames here, and this is the stock chassis, and it's got a little bit of flash. Just use a hobby knife to easily remove that from the frame. Now you'll need to gather up these parts to complete the stock frame assembly, and the transmission crossmember and the rear bumper bracket get attached to the frame, and then the frame is painted with some gloss black paint. The battery gets painted semi-gloss black and installed into the frame, and the rear bumpers are attached to the rear bumper brackets. Continuing on with the stock frame, we're going to add the rear axle halves 33 and 38 and assemble those. And then the rear axle assembly, rear spring number 22, and the rear backing plates then, numbers 36, are painted gloss black. The rear spring and both rear backing plates are attached to the rear axle assembly, and then that assembly is installed onto the stock frame assembly, and the metal axle gets slid into the axle assembly then. We'll use these pieces, the tie rod and the wishbone number 31 and the front axle number 61, and both of the front backing plates numbers 37. The brake cross shaft and the drag link then are painted Tester's gloss black, and the muffler tailpipe 64 is painted steel. The front axle then attached to the frame assembly, and the tie rod and the wishbone and both front backing plates are attached to the front axle. Now the brake cross shaft and the muffler tailpipe can be attached to the frame assembly. Then the drag link is attached to the frame assembly and the front axle, and a metal axle then can be slid into the front axle assembly. And now you can locate your mounting points and scrape off any paint so that you can glue the engine into a position on the frame. Now we'll work with the street rod frame assembly, and the center cross member there gets installed into the street rod frame, and then the assembly gets painted gloss black. Out some chrome pieces and clean up the attachment points, and the upper rear axle half number 517 gets attached to the lower, and the rear axle assembly then is attached to the frame. Both the rear backing plates numbers 36 and the sway bar can be attached to the rear axle assembly, and the rear shocks are then attached to the rear axle assembly and the frame. Now a metal axle is slid into the rear axle assembly. You can see that there's a little flash there on the lower suspension, and that can be easily trimmed with a hobby knife as opposed to sandpaper, because you want to cut it off nice and clean and it'll look pretty good. Now we can work with these front suspension parts. The lower suspension number 599 has been trimmed. Now in these figures you can see that we're going to attach that to the frame assembly, and the front axle number 598 gets attached to the lower suspension. Now the upper suspension, that's parts 591, gets attached to the frame assembly and the lower suspension, and both front backing plates numbers 523 are attached to the ends of the front axle assembly. A headlight lens is attached to the headlight with some clear part cement or white glue before the headlight assembly then can be attached to the upper suspension. Then repeat this for the second headlight assembly. Here we're going to use these parts, and both muffler tailpipes 54 and 5 and the drag link 590 are installed into the frame assembly. Now squeeze the tire assemblies, the wheel assemblies onto the axles, just to put them into each hub and squeeze them together. Now before you add the engine to its mounts, scrape off any paint or any chrome plating for that matter, wherever you find that, to make sure that the glue has a good point for adhesion, and then go ahead and put that motor in place. And now locate part number 41, that's the floor fender assembly there, and spray that with some gloss black, and it gets installed onto the stock Model A frame assembly. Paint the license plates, that's number 70, and the horn 69, they get painted semi-gloss black. The radiator number 26 is also semi-gloss black, and the radiator and cap are attached to the radiator's outer shell, number 520. Now the radiator assembly gets attached to the stock Model A frame assembly, and the front bumper number 515 can be attached to the fender assembly. Both headlight lenses, numbers 301, are glued to the headlight assembly, number 513, with some clear parts, cement or white glue, and the license plates and horn then can be glued to the headlight assembly, and then the whole headlight assembly is attached to the stock Model A fender assembly. Get these parts out, and the floor pedals number 71 are secured to the interior number 24, and then the interior assembly can be painted semi-gloss black. Now the emergency brake lever 511 and the floor shift can be installed into the interior assembly. We'll be using these parts to attach the Firewall number 32 to the stock Model A body before it is painted with some gloss black. And then the body assembly, when dry, can be installed onto the frame assembly. Now the gas cap 501 and the interior assembly can be attached to the body. There's a copyright logo stamped on the interior of the body that can easily be painted over, but you can sand it off with some fine sandpaper too. Use these parts next. Now the windshield frame number 25 and the steering column 21 and the steering wheel can be spray painted Tester's gloss black, and the instrument cluster number 512 is attached to the windshield frame. Now that frame is installed into the body. Now the steering wheel can be attached to the steering column, and then the whole column assembly is glued into the windshield frame. Now windshield part number 300 and the wind wings 302 are then attached to the frame with some clear part cement or some white glue. Next we will paint the hood rod there, the brace rod in the hood, with some gloss black, and the brace rod is installed between the Firewall and the radiator, and the hood will just slide into place later on the body assembly. And now the spare wheel halves 5 and 6 and the spare wheel cover carrier there, it gets sprayed Tester's gloss black, and the spare wheel halves can be assembled, and the wheel carrier then is attached to the rear spare tire half. Now the hub is attached to the front of the spare tire assembly, and the spare tire assembly in itself then can be attached to the body. The rear license plates gets painted gloss black, and a red taillight lens can be attached to a taillight with some clear part cement or white glue, and then the taillight assembly can be attached to the body. Do the same thing for the second taillight, the other side, and then attach the license plate to the left taillight assembly. Get these parts out, the step pads 504 and 505, and both of the rest bars, those are 514. Now the parking lights, numbers 502, and the door handles 510, and the deck lid handle 509 can be attached to the stock body assembly. Now get these items out here. These are your tops, either the top folded down or the up top version. And so the folded top number 20 gets erected, and top number 19 in both braces for the erected top, the up top are 39 and 40. And they get painted semi-gloss black. Now the rear window number 303 is installed into the up top with some clear part cement or white glue. And both of the braces, 39 and 40, are then attached to the up top, and either top can be attached then to the body assembly, depending on your choice. Now we turn back our attention to the mod rod, and we're going to take the fender assembly number 2, and that gets sprayed painted with some yellow gloss dried before being attached to the frame assembly. The seat belts 44 and 45 get attached to the interior. That's number 96 for the mod rod, and then that gets painted with some semi-gloss black. The floor pedals 522 and the shifter 518 are installed into the interior, and then the seat belt buckles are detailed with a little silver. Now we'll spray paint the body after we clean up any of the parting seams or edges or sprue point attachments, and then it gets the gloss yellow treatment and attached to the mod rod fender assembly when it's dry. Now the firewall can be attached to the body, and the interior assembly is installed into the body assembly. Locate these pieces, and the radiator is sprayed gloss yellow, and the grill number 585 and the motometer 503 are then attached to the radiator. Now the radiator assembly can be glued to the frame. The brace rod number 102 gets installed between the radiator assembly and the firewall. There's optional headlight systems that can be used for the mod rod. Now parts 586 headlight and the 306 headlight lenses can be assembled at this time. These parts are used next, and the windshield frame number 589 gets installed onto the body. Now windshield 305 is attached to the frame with some clear part cement or white glue, and the steering wheel, part number 43, gets painted tester semi-gloss black before it's attached to the steering column, part 526. And then the steering wheel assembly is installed into the windshield frame. Fuel tank gets painted silver or aluminum color, and the tank's ends 587 and the fuel cap 582 can be attached to the fuel tank. Now the fuel tank assembly is attached to the fender assembly. An option for that would be to strip the chrome off, clean up the seams, and paint the whole thing a color that matches or goes along with your body color. There are optional tail lights. You can either choose a bullet assembly or a cylindrical, and for this build I used the bullet tail lights. They got attached to the tail light 588 with some clear part cement, and then the tail light gets secured to the fender, and you do that for the other tail light. There is a custom top available for the mod rod. That's part 95, and it got sprayed with some yellow gloss, and the rear window then is cut from some clear plastic sheet and attached to the custom top with some clear parts cement. Now a template for the rear window is provided in step 4. There you have it. 2 complete models with that final step of the mod rod, and I didn't mount the custom top here. As you can see, I kind of like the open air effect of these cars. They're very versatile, and obviously the kit has a lot of nice little options for being a fairly simple and basic kit. But you could do even more things with it. You can make the race car option, so there's a lot of things to be excited about with this simple kit. Sure, the detail is simplified, but overall these are a nice looking pair for your display. So if I were you, I'd buy one, actually 2, and put it on my shelf. We hope you like this step-by-step premium quality model kit review, and so that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find us on Facebook or at our website right on Replicas.